there's the human part of, who Peter Crone is, but it's not who I am, right? So we become misidentified with our physical form of mind and body, and that's where all the suffering is. And I'm really helping people to reveal the true essence of who we are, their soul, their spirit, whatever you want to call it, which is boundless, which is pure freedom, pure love, pure peace, and not in a poetic, esoteric, woo-woo way, but like literal. We made it.
I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for your patience.
That's quite all right, my dear. Thank you for yours.
Oh yeah, no, it's good now. I'm glad we reset it a couple times, and I guess it just needed like that extra fourth time. And now we're good. So
maybe Mercury's in retrograde, maybe.
Yeah, well, and you guys, it's a full moon today, so it's probably a little bit of that as well, because, the moon and I, sometimes we dance, sometimes we banter. That's what's happening.
Well, it's a pleasure to connect. How's this? I haven't done this for a little while. We did one back, obviously, in the middle of the COVID nonsense.
Yes.
But I might actually improve the lighting a little bit for you folks, so bear with me 2 seconds.
Okay, you go ahead and do that. So many people are really excited to come on. Everyone was amazing. So I had taken a minute to acknowledge our audience. Oh, that's great.
How's that? Look at that, like a pro.
Look at that.
Anyway, good to see everyone. How are we? It's been a while.
Yes, it has, and everyone's really excited. I had a chance to get on for a few minutes before you, just to give a real brief intro, a reminder of the last interview that we did, how people can kind of go and check that out. All the replays are on YouTube. But for those of you who don't know Peter yet, or this is the first time that you're tuning in with him live because you only caught the replay on YouTube the last time, I would love if you could give everyone just a real brief intro, some background on you, Peter, so that people can really get to know you before we deep dive into freedom with depression.
Freedom
from depression.
Well, first of all, it's fantastic to see everyone. I don't know why I don't do these lives more often. It's actually really fun. So thank you for hosting me. We did a bunch. I did a bunch during COVID. One was with you, and people just loved it. So thank you everyone for showing up and for all the love. I can see a ton of love coming in with the comments, so that means a lot. So for those of you not familiar, my name out there in the big wide world has sort of become synonymous with the mind architect. And what does that mean? I'm helping people to get out of the way, get out of their own way. I'm really releasing these deep subconscious constraints that I would assert are very ubiquitous. They're primal patterns that every human being is going to have because we're sort of designed to survive. But they become a huge impediment to us enjoying life and being free and being healthy and having amazing relationships and making the money we want. And all of the things that humans crave, I assert, are on the other side of these limitations. So I help people to find those and then to break free so you can have an extraordinary life. I love you too, Kat and Randy Long and all of these. Just so much love here.
Yes, so much love. So much love, and I wish that the replay saved the comments. It doesn't, but I wish it did, because sometimes there's just such beautiful feedback from the community, and sometimes I can go through the screenshot and show you, but just so much love for you in this community, and something that some people may not have known before they jumped on, if they're meeting for the first time, is that you actually experienced tremendous loss and trauma and heartbreak in your experience, which is really kind of what led you through this path, and this journey. And I think that's something important for people to know and understand as they're learning from you, just to know what that background is. And where this kind of passion came from.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously done a bunch of podcasts now, and I feel very grateful for the myriad of hosts that have had me on, and that's been really humbling to see the response. I think of all the podcasts I've done, I've done a couple with Aubrey Marcus 3 times. I just did Dr. Rangan Chatterjee England 3 times because their audience keeps asking me to come back on, which is incredibly humbling. But on the podcast, I shared my story that I was orphaned at a young age. My mom died of cancer when I was 7. My dad went to work one day when I was 17 and never came back. He was sadly killed in a fatal accident on what we call ferries, the boats that go between England and France. And I was an only child, so to be orphaned by the age of 17 obviously is quite challenging. And it was certainly pivotal in the way that it framed my identity. As you said, I became very scared of losing anything that was of importance to me, right? Certainly if I met someone, my particular story was meeting a girl that I fell in love with, or whatever I thought love was at the right age of 28, 29, whatever we think we know about love. And then she equally left me, which brought to the surface all of the feelings of loss that I had obviously created when my parents had passed. And that was really the catalyst for me to see, wow, there's the human part of, who Peter Crone is, but it's not who I am, right? So we become misidentified with our physical form of mind and body, and that's where all the suffering is. And I'm really helping people to reveal the true essence of who we are, their soul, their spirit, whatever you want to call it, which is boundless, which is pure freedom, pure love, pure peace, and not in a poetic, esoteric, woo-woo way, but like literal, And as long as we become misidentified with our narratives, for me, lost. For somebody else, it might be they're not good enough. For somebody else, it might feel that they don't have any value or they're not wanted. And living in those worlds, it's incredibly discomforting. And that to me is dis-ease, the absence of ease that then becomes a precursor to sickness, which obviously you help a lot of people with on the physical level. But if we don't address what's going on in the deep subconscious patterns, then, we could argue you can't have physical health without mental health. And I would actually assert they're one and the same, right? So,
absolutely.
So that's a bit of my background.
Yes, and thank you so much for that. And just to sort of echo what Peter was saying for my community that's familiar with what I do in terms of culinary alchemy, that's really healing the physical body and also that energy body, and just kind of using foods and supplements as that tool. But it is so profoundly important that your soul body, your mental body, your emotional body is equally healthy in order for your physical body to have that optimal health. And so that's why everything that you do resonates with me so deeply, and it actually is fully in alignment with my practice, in the way that I work. So there are several people here that have already taken some of your workshops, and a lot of beautiful response to it. It's changed their life. They highly recommend it. And I think that some of the questions that some of these people have is just like, how is this one different? How is freedom from depression slightly nuanced from some of your other programs? And I know that everyone's excited about it, but I think that's one of the main questions that had come through before.
For sure, it's a great question. So I've done a few now. My primary course is called Free Your Mind, and that's a much bigger deep dive. It's an extensive amount of content. There's hours of content with you do questionnaires. So it's very you're engaged in the process too. Like I take people through a series of questions for their own life. The workshops are a little bit more of a shorter deep dive where I'm just speaking to a particular subject. So I've done 4 already. One was about our dysfunctional relationship to time. One was about relationships and why most relationships are dysfunctional. Then I did one recently on anxiety. And the reason I decided to do freedom from depression is the one on anxiety was so well received, and people were like, wow, I struggled with anxiety for like decades. I've taken medication, I see therapists. But in your workshop, I literally saw why I have anxiety, right? This is where my work is different, because most people are looking for solutions or strategies to a problem. But if you really understand that, you are actually reinforcing the underlying belief that you have a problem. Right? So what I do, my work is about dissolving what is the precursor to the issue. So understanding why people had anxiety is very empowering, so that instead of now trying to escape it with alcohol, weed, prescribed drugs, whatever it is that they need, where I have a lot of compassion, now they're like, oh, I can relate it to certain incidents in my childhood where I felt, for example, that I wasn't safe, and that creates a feeling of being scared, right? So the reason, to come back to your question, so many people wrote in and said, I struggle with depression, my spouse, even my kids, my friends, would you please do what you did for anxiety, but for depression, because it's changed my life. So that's why I decided to do one on depression, because it's similar, but different. And by that, I mean similar that there are these deep blind spots that nobody knows about or can't see. They know how they feel. They know they feel apathetic. What's the point? There's a heaviness. There's a resignation to people's life. It impacts their productivity. They procrastinate. They start to feel, like they're losing their motivation for life. Everyone can relate to that. But if you don't know where it's coming from, then it's just a horrible place to be. So that's why really the community asked me to speak to depression so that they can become empowered to step outside of it and find freedom, which, as you know, is my main product, on the other side of these limitations of the mind. So I'm just so excited. I mean, I really listen to my community. I feel so blessed. I feel my life is a byproduct of the community that, they come, they ask incredible questions, they show up, they do the work, they want to be better people, they want to have great relationships, they want to be healthy. And I just feel blessed that I can be a catalyst to help them find all of that. So depression is something that impacts, I think, according to the World Health Organization, about 350 million people around the world, suffer with depression. So if I can just nudge the needle a little bit and help some of those, then, I love doing that.
Well, and just to take a moment to really acknowledge you, Peter. I know you did that, in the introduction and before you even came on, but I really just want to acknowledge you and say thank you for what you do for the community, and the fact that you are so you really do listen, and you create for the community that which they ask for, and you've done it. This time, but you've done it over and over, and that's powerful. And there's so much feedback from that, not just I know to you, but even towards me. There are people that are asking when you're free, your mind course will be opening up again, but wouldn't that be after the depression workshop?
Yes, so we get a lot of that question. So firstly, thank you for the acknowledgement. That means a lot. You're the sort of the ardent professional, like the way you even do this, the way you set it up, the beautiful assets of the JPEGs you create, you really run a very tight ship, and I really just admire that, and I feel very blessed that I get to come on here. I know you have an amazing audience who really are committed to taking care of themselves, so thank you for the reflection. I feel, I just shot this TV episode yesterday with this amazing woman, and I don't know when it airs, but it was just so powerful, because here's a woman, she's got a PhD, she's beautiful, she's got, material success, she's got her own show, but she'd been suffering for over a decade since her father had passed in an accident, very similar to mine in as much as, her dad went to work and never came back. And, she's got all the resources that we would want, apparently, as a human, but internally, she was in a complete prison. And it impacted her ability. She hasn't got a serious relationship. Her relationships haven't worked. She's got this feeling of missing in her life, sort of an intrepidation about her future. Are things going to work out? Things that everyone can relate to. But on the surface, it looks like, as quintessential as that is, that everything's together. So for me to sit there and in about an hour and 20 minutes, completely shatter what was holding her back, there's just no greater feeling. And she was, at the end, her words were, I feel like I'm levitating. That's how light and free she felt once I removed those shackles. So I don't know when that'll air. Obviously, I'll post about it. But I'm excited to really to reflect to you how I just feel very humbled that I get to do this. Like every day, I'm freeing people's minds. And so the Free Your Mind course will come out again. It will probably be, I would say, middle of September-ish, sometime middle to late September. That's a prediction. Don't hold me to that. But we'll do the Freedom from Depression coming up on July 31st. Okay. And then, so many people are asking for that because it is a much more extensive course. And what's exciting is, I can let you know, haven't announced this, so my team might be like, wait, what are you saying? We're actually going to create a Free Your Mind series, but to help people coach. So people are always like, how do you do what you do? Like, it's incredible. I've never seen anyone do this. Yeah. So we're going to do the Free Your Mind program, and then there'll be a really extensive, and again, we're just figuring out the final details, but whether you don't have to be a life coach, you could be a yoga teacher, you could be a nutritionist, you could be
I'm interested. I would love to know more. We got to talk details on that.
So anyone who's in the care, service industry of wanting to help, you could be a therapist, you could be like, a fitness trainer, but you want to know how to speak to people and help them, then we wanted to take Free Your Mind, which itself is so comprehensive. But we're also, then I'm going to add these videos to explain, because in the Free Your Mind program, there's 4 people I work with, so you get to witness their transformation. But I'm going to explain how I did it.
Yes.
So that will come out probably, as I said, mid to end of September.
Amazing. And amazing. And if for those of you who haven't experienced the Free Your Mind, I mean, that's something I would definitely put on your calendar when that becomes available. It's just it's extraordinary just to watch the process, and then now there's a chance that you can learn how to actually help people in your life with that. So there's some questions that have popped up. I definitely want to honor the community by asking a few of them. I know that we just asked a couple. And then if we, for people who haven't really experienced any of your workshops, like, what would it be like, going through, maybe we can ask a couple questions now, or kind of give a little bit of a sneak peek into what that will look like so people know. And you guys, by the way, if you don't already follow Peter, you need to. On the bottom here, I pinned a comment. It's the name of our topic today. And it also has Peter's Instagram handle. So make sure you go there, you follow, and you can check out all the dates and the timing for all of this. And then you can sign up for the Freedom from Depression workshop that starts on July 31st. So, and I'll remind people of that kind of like throughout in case people kind of pop in and pop out.
Thank you.
So there were questions about just how parents can deal with their children, and kind of navigate that. And that was something that was a question that popped up several times. If the program is friendly for teenagers or for children, like is there an age range in terms of whether or not it's appropriate for them?
The Freedom from Depression or the Free Your Mind?
The Freedom from Depression.
For sure, it's for everybody. Yeah, I mean, I'm blessed to work with, in the TV show, I think yesterday I said, I work with everyone from 70-year-old billionaires to, young teens who are struggling with identity crisis and comparing themselves to everybody on Instagram. There's a lot of pressure for kids these days. So, it's for everybody, because the main tenets that I share about the restrictions and the limitations that we have, they're ubiquitous. They're human. So whether you're a kid, someone who's struggling in their 20s, to find your way and get a career after college, or you're going through a big life transition like divorce in your 40s or 50s, whatever it is, like, people are really, this appeals to humans, right? My work, and again, I don't mean to sound trite, but it's like, that's why I get to work with these quote unquote big influencers in the world, whether it be sports, entertainment, or business, because I care so much, I couldn't care less who they are. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't care that you're so-and-so famous person. You're a human being first, and you're struggling with anxiety, depression. You feel worthless. You've got an addiction. You've got a sickness. Whatever it is, that's what I look at. That's fine that you make millions and millions of dollars and you've got millions of fans, but I deal with the human being first. So it really is for everybody. Every client I've ever worked with fundamentally says, can you please help my kids? And that's why we'll probably do a workshop on parenting too, because parents are doing the best they can. I mean, I think it's probably the hardest job on the planet, and the one that, warrants the most admiration. And no one's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect mom or dad. You do the best you can. But there are ways to understand how your energy and your language and your behavior influences either a survival mindset with your children or a mindset of love and acceptance. And so that's also something that I help a lot of people with, is the more transformative way to be a conscious parent. So again, that will probably be something in the future.
That's wonderful. I mean, brilliant because I had a holistic child psychologist that was on earlier this week, and was
Amazing.
just talking about how that it really starts. The foundation starts with the parents, and like how you navigate your own your mind, right, and
Yeah.
your behavior. And this is I would say something for the parents out there who had asked if this is helpful for their children. Obviously, 100%. But for you, so that you can set that foundation and that framework within your family, and that your children will model after you, right?
Yes.
So
we learn mostly by mimicking. So even ourselves, whoever's on here as an adult, whatever you deal with is invariably going to be by virtue of the fact that you inherited some behavioral adaptation beliefs from your parents. Not wrong or right. But for example, how many of us have heard from a parent, money doesn't grow on trees because as a kid we wanted something.
Yeah.
And so you hear that becomes a piece of code in your mind, money doesn't grow on trees. What's the subtext of that narrative is there's scarcity.
Yeah.
Right? So now you wonder why, as a 34-year-old or 42-year-old, that you don't, quote unquote, have everything you want without really looking at, oh wow, I'm living within this mental prison of money doesn't grow on trees. Now, that's not to say that money does grow on trees, but it's just to notice that becomes an obstacle to truly living a life of abundance, right? So that's just one very simple example. And how many of those pieces of code did we pick up and listen to unconsciously that made us feel that we're not wanted, that we're not as good as our older sibling, or, the neighbor's daughter who got A grades and we didn't, and now we've struggle in middle management and wondering why we're not getting the promotion or we're not getting paid what we wanted. Well, you're still living in the prison of you feel that you're inadequate relative to others. And that can be, depressive as a feeling, right? It's like that worthlessness, the pointlessness. So that's what I undo is it's really like reprogramming the subconscious to go, wow. And this is what happened on the TV show that I was on yesterday. Like she did not know that she was in a prison. It's a blind spot.
Yes.
So there's no fault, right? It's like It's not her fault, but it completely impacted every area of her life. Once you bring awareness to that, which is what I do in these workshops, then there's this epiphany and there's this euphoric feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm living in a prison that's not a truth. So, that's where people all of a sudden find a sense of freedom.
Yeah, that's it's such a powerful reminder, because I think that like what you said is something that I'd like to repeat, is that we're unaware. I think a lot of us, and I'm myself included, I think that we're so unaware of these prisons that we have created in our mind. We're so unaware of these traumas, because I think that when we think about the word trauma, and I have some that are different. I lost my dad, and just my 8 surgeries, and having really died. Like there's definitely, I've had trauma and I've had loss. But I think that people have a tendency to associate trauma and loss to extreme circumstances like that. And it's important, I think, to remind people that you don't necessarily have to have lost someone by death. You don't have to. You don't need to have gone through something like a near-death experience to have experienced trauma, and that I think most of us forget that.
Listen, it's why you're great at what you do, because you understand the subtleties. Like I for the longest time in my career didn't really use the word trauma because I just felt it was a very dramatic word, But more and more now, I recognize that even the subtlest form of dismissal towards a kid, and it could be like, go to your room, right? You don't associate a child being told to go to their room as traumatic as somebody who's being physically hit or, God forbid, sexually abused, right? And that's happening, and that's more trauma. But what I recognize is for that human being, they only know what they know, right? So that's their version of trauma. And wherever there is what I say, the absence of love, where a kid is dismissed, like often children are to be seen and not heard, that creates for a child the feeling of not being wanted, not being loved. That's a trauma, right? And so that will manifest as a compensation. So that person might become a people pleaser when they're older. They may become a perfectionist as a compensation pattern, Yeah, you fall into that category for sure. As a way of surviving a deep-seated pattern of inadequacy. So wherever there has been some absence of love, I now, in my own work, recognize that is a form of trauma. And it's on a sliding scale, right? I'm not saying, as I said, people who go through these abhorrent things that I've helped. I remember one of my clients, it's so sad, but she was beaten by her own mum for about 3 hours with a whip when she was 11. She couldn't even see. Her whole body went into this inflammatory state where everything was so inflamed, her eyes closed, so that's just horrific, abhorrent, and to help her get over what she had to go through as an adult because of that experience that's very traumatic. But everybody on here, because you're human, you are going to have your version of trauma, even if your parents are beautiful and then, oh my God, my parents are so lovely. I get it. It's part of the human journey that you're here to be able to reconcile something that is a limitation, and it doesn't have to be the extremes. For myself, my parents were beautiful. I love my dad, but they passed when I was very young, which of course that's more of a trauma. Both my parents dying before I'm even 18. That's, you could say, traumatic. I wouldn't have looked at my life as traumatic. It's just my life. Like, we don't know anything other than our own life. But emotionally, energetically, psychologically, it did impact me in ways that I wasn't aware until I was aware, and that's when I broke free, and that's why I love to bring this to everybody else. So it's just really humbling and inspiring and empowering that people are that interested in being free and having extraordinary lives and feeling at peace and being vital. And I get to do that every day. So yes, trauma, it's a huge buzzword for people, whether we call it trauma, abuse, hurt, disappointment. It's all in that same family of where as a child we went through something that we couldn't process because we were young, and it still impacts us today as adults. And to be able to break free of that, that's true liberation.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, that's truly living. And that's why I think not just in this workshop in particular, but I would say all your workshops, and all your teachings, I think it's truly for everyone. It really is truly applicable for everyone. And that's why I kind of wanted to touch on like what an individual person may define as trauma and loss. And then the other thing that I'd like to just sort of make a note to the audience is that sometimes there's guilt and shame that surrounds, a traumatic experience or a situation where, as Peter says, there wasn't love present. And there's maybe shame or guilt or you don't want to, you want to honor maybe your parents, there was a traumatic experience with your parents, they didn't show you love, they sent you to your room, they didn't know any better, and so you don't want to acknowledge that. And what I'd like to remind everyone here is just like, it's okay to acknowledge that, and that's why Peter's work is so profound. Is that you might not even realize that you need it, and there's no shame or blame for anything that had happened to have created that sort of imprint in our minds at all. And that's why Peter's work is it's vital. I really believe it is, and it's so crucial to just really having an optimal life.
And again, I love that you bring up the point, because a lot of people are scared. I mean, there was someone I helped recently who was sexually abused. Like, she was raped by somebody when she was very young, and she didn't tell her parents because she felt so ashamed. As you can understand, like, that's, she was like, I think 13, and it was like, for her, she thought it was her fault. And that's obviously an extreme. But how often have we gone through something where, a parent did something, they had a bad day, they're stressed, maybe they'd lost their job, and they raise their voice, God forbid they hit a kid. And that child, because they love their parents, they don't want to throw them under the bus. And they're like, no, my mom was amazing, but your mom was also human, and she had bad days too. Or your dad, occasionally he was feeling a lot of pressure, and he would, lose his centeredness. And for a kid to try and protect their parents, I get it. And it's very, there's a lot of compassion for that. And there's no blame here. That's the thing. For me in my work, there's no blame to the parent. There's no blame to self. It's just bringing awareness and compassion that your parents did the best they could within their conditioning. And you're doing the best you can within your conditioning. But conditioning is invariably incredibly limited. So if we can expand beyond that conditioning, then literally a whole new world of possibility becomes available for people.
Yes.
I mean, this woman yesterday, it's fresh because I just did it, but like, you know, she's on the surface got everything. Beautiful, successful, resources, intelligent, but she was in a prison that she didn't know about, and now she literally is like, at the end, she was a bit discombobulated. It was kind of, you know, like in the Matrix, they say you don't free your mind after a certain age because it's like it's too unsettling. But that's what I'm doing, is pulling the rug from beneath people's identities, and then you're suddenly left with this blank canvas, which is incredibly liberating, but you're also like, well, who am I and what do I do now? You know, it's like, which is fun because now you step into creativity and you start to really design your own identity again. But yeah, so I love the fact that you note that this isn't about pointing fingers. No one did anything to us. Like, I could have said, oh, it's so unfair and life is a bitch because, you know, my parents died. Like, that leaves me as a victim of circumstance, and that's very disempowering, right? So I'm letting people find their own sense of real responsibility, but without the shame and guilt. And the freedom from depression, I'm really going to be talking about that dynamic of shame and guilt, because it is really associated with our history, you know, and where we drag things, the quintessential baggage that people have, right? So that's what I'm going to be able to help people to let go of, literally let go of that weight that they've been carrying.
Oh, so powerful. And you know, we did have several questions that came through. Just, you know, if I know I'm in this, as you call, prison, just some comments just came in now, and some that I dropped into the box, but still feeling resistant. You know, what are some steps? I would say you guys sign up for the workshop, obviously. But if there's anything that, you know, the workshop doesn't start for another week or so, you know, is there something that they can do to prepare themselves? And again, you guys really, you need to sign up for the workshop and follow Peter and his work. But there's a week between now when the workshop starts. So what are some small things that they can do to start getting themselves prepared? I think some people are afraid. You know, they're afraid of that release, or they're, you know, so just like some people are afraid of therapy in a way, to have to kind of go in and uncover something you've kind of built a nice thick skin over, you know, even if you're aware that it's there, and now you've got to rip that Band-Aid off. And I think some people are afraid of that. So how can we prepare people for it?
I mean, really great question, and I love how sensitive you are to where, you know, people are at, right? Like, and again, this is where I come from, just love and acceptance and patience and compassion. Everybody's doing the best they can, right? Within the limits of their awareness. So first of all, I saw a question earlier about, is my workshop like Tony Robbins? Nothing like Tony Robbins. I mean, I'm not a big fan of his, nothing against him. His style is very rah-rah, motivated.
Very different style.
Like screaming, and, you know, like you're in an auditorium for like 26 hours, like, you know, non-stop and whatever it is. No, this workshop it's, you know, we slate it at 75 to 90 minutes, and it's online. I tend to run over because I have so much to share and I like to give value. But it's more, my work is much more thought-provoking, right? Instead of getting you all riled up and motivated, it's more like if you can reflect back on your mind and go, wow, I didn't know that I was, quote unquote, in a mindset of limitation. So that itself is what I call revelatory, right? It's revealing. And that revelation is where the freedom comes. So what can people do between now and then, or even if people don't want to do the workshop, that's totally fine, I understand. What I say is, you know, notice where you get triggered in life, right? It's your spouse, it's your boss, it's your in-laws, it's, you know, maybe your kids. Like, where do you get triggered? That's the goal, first of all. Is what is it that is upsetting you, and where have you fallen prey to the illusion that, well, no, it's my mother-in-law that upsets me. So first of all, that's a lie. So for people to understand that, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not being upset by my circumstances, but rather my circumstances are revealing where is the upset in me already. That's the first step to empowerment. Because see, if I'm a victim, if I'm really upset because somebody cut me off in traffic. Well, now I'm saying I'm a victim of circumstance. That's a lousy place to live. You know, someone in a piece of metal and plastic with 4 tires pulled in front of my car. That's reality. That does not upset me. I upset me. Right? So that's the first thing is people go, oh, wow, that's cool. I'm not a victim of circumstance, even though I thought I was. So wherever you do get triggered, that's the goal. And we want to be able to reverse engineer that and go, okay, what is my brain saying? What is the perceived threat? Because there's always a perceived threat. It's because of my perspective. My spouse said something, my sibling said something, my boss did something, and I got upset. In that interaction, stimulus, response, there has to be some lens you're looking through that has you perceive a threat. Let's take a very simple example. The boss says, I like this one, trigger. My sister thinks I should have the vaccine.
I know, I saw that.
That's a big trigger, right?
That's a whole nother live, you guys.
Huh?
I said that's a whole nother live, you guys.
Yeah, that's a very slippery conversation, but a very important one. What's going on right now is pretty disgusting. Anyway, so boss calls you into the office or says, I need to see you in my office in an hour. That's what is said. And that person might go into a mild state of anxiety or worry. You know, again, there's a continuum, right? It's not for complete panic, but there could be like concern or apprehension. But you don't know what's going to be said, right? So there's a perceived threat. The brain is anticipating something in the future that's not good. What if the boss is calling into the office to acknowledge you for the work you're doing and saying, hey, I just want to give you a raise because you're really making a difference here, right? Then the feeling in that hour before you go into the office would be of excitement or enthusiasm, right? That's as real as the feeling of apprehension or worry. They're both completely manufactured by your own brain. So this is where, to help people understand, wow, I, self, am literally the generator of my own experience. Once people start to get that, you become a sovereign being in the way that you go around the planet and you decide your own experience. Now, that's the ideal. I'm not saying that's easy because there's deep conditioning, but then no matter what happens, I'm not a victim of event, but rather I am the source, S-O-U-R-C-E, of my own experience. That's very empowering for any human being because we all face challenges. I've been doing this for over 2 decades. I work with the best of the best in every industry. You know, the people that reach out to me, even I'm like, how do they even hear about me? But, you know, because they're this uber successful person. But I'm helping those people because they're just inspired to live a life of empowerment, right? And so for me, it's like, wow, that is just such a nice way to be able to go around the planet and not be a victim of whatever's going on wrong. There's still challenges. I live an amazing life and I still have what we could call life adversity, but it's not something that it causes my upset. It's just something that I handle or I don't handle. Either way, I'm no longer a victim. So
no, and I love that. And you know, just how I do by way of food and supplements and Reiki, you do with this process, and you're just giving people their power back. That was we come into the world with this power, you know, and we forget that. And so Peter essentially gives you back that power that is already yours and changes the way you just not only see yourself, but you see the world. It's almost like coming out with a different set of lenses.
It truly is. I mean, that's one of my favorite quotes is by this French author called Marcel Proust. And he said that the journey of true discovery lies not in finding new lands, but in looking through new eyes.
Yes.
That's true discovery. So I'm like an eye surgeon, looking at the scalpel and the anesthetic, but I'm giving, like this woman yesterday and every client I work with, I'm giving people new eyes. What's the way the world's currently set up is that we have experts. What do experts do? No, not an expert. They try and help you with your problem. But what does that do? That reinforces the belief that you have one, right?
Yes.
So now you're in this vicious cycle. I mean, I worked with a client recently, they've been in therapy for 15 years, and we had 2 sessions, and they're like, I got more out of these sessions in 15 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars of therapy because they were trying to fix their depression or fix their anxiety or fix their fear. I'm like, but you don't have any of those things. Once we reveal the underlying mental prison, then it's a dissolution process, right? Like one of my catchphrases, I don't solve problems, I dissolve. And that's a very different approach.
Yes. Oh, brilliant. And and there's some great questions here. I know we're kind of coming up to when we're going to have to jump off, you guys.
Yeah.
There were a couple of questions about layers if there were layers of the subconscious mind that you have to go through, or if this process you can get, from, and there are no guarantees, you guys. Everybody's different. It's still a lot of work. It's your commitment. But whether or not would they have to go through this workshop multiple times because they have to go through all these layers of the subconscious? Another person said, just can you look through more than one lens at the same time? I thought that was a good question as well.
That's a great question. So yes and yes, really, to those two questions. So the way I'd say it is, it's not so much there are many layers to the subconscious. I would say there are just many aspects.
Yes.
Right. So in my work, and I'm writing my first book, and I delineate what I consider to be the 10 primal prisons. Right. So I've delineated there are 10. So the one that people can often relate to as a very simple example is like, I'm not enough. Like everybody's got their version. I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not wealthy enough, I'm not thin enough, like whatever it is, right? That is a primal prison that everyone's got their own version. But as long as you're in the world of I'm not enough, you are going to feel some degree of suffering, right? And then you'll have your compensation pattern. If I'm not good enough, then I have to become a perfectionist. But you're a perfectionist now on top of still thinking you're not good enough. So that would be one lens. So there are multiple lenses. So they're not so much layers. This is why I do multiple workshops, because I will look at the specific lenses that are appropriate to the workshop I'm doing, right? Like when my clients work with me for, like I have athletes who work with me for seasons, then we can go through all of them. But, it's both very intricate and detailed, but it also takes time. Like I was with this woman, never met her before, didn't know anything about her history, and yet in an hour, she became both basically liberated, but also disoriented in a good way, pure possibility. And that was just one lens, right? If I'd taken her through everything, it's kind of like she would have literally lost her mind in the next day. So it's like there's an integration process that is very important, and this is why I break down the different workshops so that people go, oh, wow. Here's one aspect of where as human beings we get stopped, and once they step out of that, boom, I enter a whole new world of freedom, and that's just the best gift I can give anyone.
Yeah, and then you're just amazing, Peter. Thank you so much, and thank you for that reminder too, because there is an integration process, and it's important to keep that in mind. And that's why having the workshop segmented out the way they are is important through that whole process, for that integration process, to make sure that this is permanence for you as you are in this freedom state in every aspect of your life. So you guys, I know that we could probably talk here forever, and I've got to run because I have a meeting that I have to drive to, but go to the pinned comment here. If you don't already follow Peter, you must follow him, Peter Crone Official on Instagram, and then you can go sign up. I think all the information that you need is on your Instagram account, right, Peter?
And if you go to the bio, just even petercrone.com, and you'll click on courses and you'll find it. And there's other ones. Like if people want to revisit their health or relationship or anxiety, they can. So, but anyway, I know we both got to run. Thank you, everyone. I sent so much love. Serena, you're an angel. Let's do this again. I miss the lives. Thank you for having me on, and just doing the best I can to help people live an extraordinary life and enhance the areas of their life that are important to them.
No, you're amazing, and I'm so grateful. And we should absolutely do this again. We'll
it's fun.
Set aside some more time. You guys seem to absolutely love this and love Peter, and I do as well. So we'll do this again. But in the meantime, go follow him. Go check out Freedom from Depression and his other workshops as well. And you want to sign up because it starts in like a week.
And we did this last time, and I totally forgot. If people want to take a screenshot, even like right now, I know we're wrapping up, so maybe even screenshot a little video, whatever works for you. And if you share it on your stories, I'm going to give away one registration to somebody to the Freedom from Depression, whoever does that. So we'll pick someone in the next few days. I just made this up on the fly because we did that last time and people loved it. But if you want to share it with your stories, obviously, include Serena and myself. And I'd love to gift that to somebody so you can attend.
Beautiful. You're wonderful. I love that. And you guys, I know there's some people have already jumped off, but like at least go screenshot, tag this. You can screenshot or tag or repost even the post that I put down there. Tag Peter. I'm excited. And that's awesome. I'm excited for all of you guys. And I hope I'll see you guys there. So thank you so much, Peter. I'm going to call you in a minute. I want to jump off now. You guys' replays will be on YouTube. So I know that a lot of you guys, you know that. If you don't, go subscribe. The replay will be there. And you don't have to take as many notes as you realize you do when you have the replay. So I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Much love.